alaikum. Welcome to the program Islam Explained. We have here our theologian, Omar Argi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aysel. Thank you again for calling me.
Not a problem at all. It's a pleasure to have you here. Now, Omar, this book, I believe you've written about the companions of the Prophet, Sahaba. I'd like to probably take an approach where we talk about a bit about the companions, the Sahaba, if you don't mind, that is.
Yes, pleasure.
Now, just before we begin talking a bit about the Sahaba, if you could just define what Sahaba means.
Yes, I think it's important to define what a Sahaba, a companion of the Prophet, as we say it in English, what it means to be a Sahaba. Technically, Sahaba means a person who have met the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who has embraced Islam and died as a Muslim as well.
That's so these are the conditions for to be a Sahaba. Now, in your book, you start with Mus'ab ibn Umayr, a very fruitful, a very charismatic type of a character. It was one of the first companions you have in the book. So if you don't mind, if we could start with Mus'ab ibn Umayr. Talk a bit about him, his life.
Inshallah, we'll talk about Mus'ab. Of course, they all have glorious lives, very interesting lives as well. But there's one more point that I want to make before I begin with Mus'ab. The Prophet himself, ﷺ, when he talks about his ashab, his sahaba, he says that they are like the stars in the sky. Whoever you wish to follow, they will take you to salvation. And of course, Mus'ab was one of them. As you know, at the time when the Prophet received his message and he became a messenger of God, Mus'ab was, they say, the historians suggest that he was about 18. He was in his late teens. And he was a very interesting individual. He belonged to a very wealthy family. With his spendings, he was very extravagant, he lived a life of opulence. They say that he would wear the best garments. Even his shoes would be brought from Yemen, quite a distance from Mecca. And he was a very popular young man, popular in Mecca. And historians say that when he used to walk the streets of Mecca, girls will come out onto their balconies all the way to their bellies just to get a glimpse of Mus'ab's face. Yeah. He was a very handsome young man too.
A bachelor.
Yeah, a bachelor, yeah. Suitable bachelor, isn't it? And very interestingly, those days Mecca was run by Quraysh, and they had this special gathering, a committee of chieftains where they used to meet in Kaaba. And all of these people were experienced people, experienced politicians, we can say as well. And the requirement to enter this gathering was at least you needed to be over 40, the age of 40, because you needed that background for it. But interestingly, Mus'ab was admitted to this group at the age of 18, in his teens, because he was a very intelligent young man as well. And at the time when the Prophet ﷺ began to sort of convey his message of Islam, Mus'ab heard about it, and he was very curious. He was a very inquisitive young man as well, and he decided to investigate. And one day he went to the Prophet's gathering, where they used to come together at the house of Arqam bin Abi Arqam. And it was the last house at the outskirts of Mecca, as you know, because they were afraid of, there was a lot of people who were very poor and weak. Amongst them, there were slaves, who embraced Islam. And to avoid torture, harassment, they used to sort of conceal their meetings as well. They used to meet in secrecy with the Prophet ﷺ. And one day Mus'ab went there.
So he obviously found where the location was.
Yes, he found out where they used to meet, and he visited it, knocked on the door. They invited him in, and he listened to the Prophet. And with his own words, he said later on that it was like honey, flowing from his mouth, referring to the Prophet ﷺ. And of course, the nur, the light of Iman, entered Mus'ab Mus'ab's heart immediately there, and he embraced Islam. You know, he became the Ummah of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But there was a very serious obstacle on the path of Mus'ab bin Umayr, and it was a woman named Hunnes binti Malik.
That was his mother.
Yeah, it was his mother, and she was a very powerful woman within the Meccan society. She had a bit of a weight around as well. She had men working, you know, for her as well. And when she heard about it through a man named Talha, who saw Mus'ab entering the house of Ibn Arqam, straight away he went and explained it to his mother. She was furious,
Of course.
you know, to use terms like she hit the root.
Yeah.
And she was very upset, and she tried to sort of convince him into not to following Prophet Muhammad's path, but it didn't work, and she had no other alternatives from her perspective, and she decided to put him under house arrest.
Wow.
He was her own son.
Yeah.
He was locked up in a room, and there was 2 guards placed in front of his door.
This was so he could give up the religion.
So he could give up, following Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. After a while, meanwhile, of course, in Mecca, as you know, Quraysh was, you know, continuously harassing, especially the weak Muslims who had embraced Islam.
Yeah.
You know, some of them were tortured, and quite horrific tortures occurred, you know.
How was it that Mus'ab was able to get out from the house arrest?
Yeah, Mus'ab found a chance when the guards were not at the door. He slipped out of the house. And at the time, you know, as you know, the incident that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, ordered some of his weaker companions to travel to Abyssinia, to migrate to Abyssinia. There was a king there, King Negus,
Yes.
and he was a Christian man, and he said, look, he is one of the people of the book. He's a good man. He will protect you. And a small group of people, you know, did their migrations to Abyssinia. Mus'ab joined them.
He was one of them, yeah.
And they lived a good life there. They were able to practice their religion. You know, nobody stopped them from doing so. And after a while, Mus'ab heard, you know, some news came over to Abyssinia. Heard that conditions in Mecca had changed. People were more soft towards Muslims, you know. And there was no harassments anymore.
So he decided to return back.
He decided to return back, but of course the news was false,
Yeah.
because the reality was situations, conditions have even worsened.
Yeah.
There were people who were being killed through tortures. And when Mus'ab came back, his mother heard about it straight away, and she confronted him, and she wanted to put him under arrest again, you know, house arrest again.
Yeah.
And this time Mus'ab stood straight and faced her, you know, and he said, look, Mom, I love you, you know that, you know. But you have to understand that I will never give up the path of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. If you decide to send your men against me again, wallahi, by God, I will fight them to death until one of us die. And she realized that she didn't want to lose her son either.
That's
Of course,
right, not
you
being
know.
killed.
Yeah, and she realized that, you know, there was no chance anymore of, you know, changing Mus'ab's mind. And she accepted the situation, although she was quite angry with Mus'ab. He invited her to Islam as well. She rejected it, you know. And she used a term like, you know, if all the stars came down from the sky upon my head, I would not, you know, convert to Muhammad's religion. Peace and blessings be upon him. So from that day on, Mus'ab began his life of struggle.
And the lives that parted from his mother.
Yes,
And her mother obviously did not give any of her wealth or share
yes. So he lost everything. He lost everything. You know, he lost
It's
his
quite
wealth.
courageous to
Yeah, he lost his
from
wealth.
something like that.
Definitely, definitely. It was a hard, difficult situation. And from that day on, people say that Mus'ab would walk around Mecca with only a piece of fabric covering, you know, him from his belly button to his knees.
Wow. From what he was and to what he became.
That's true. Just because he believed, just because he said La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And as you know, after a while, the tortures, the harassment, increased, and the noble Prophet ﷺ decided to send Mus'ab to Medina, Yathrib, and there he would be like an ambassador of Muslims, and he would strategically perhaps try to prepare the people of Medina for the future migration that would occur.
Mhm.
Because Muslims could not live in Mecca anymore at that point. And when Mus'ab went to Medina all alone, at that young age, he met a person called Asad bin Zurare there, who had already embraced Islam before. And together, they tried to invite people to Islam in Medina to find supporters for the Prophet. And they would go to different gatherings, and Mus'ab would explain about Islam to them with what knowledge he had learned from the Prophet
It was quite intelligent.
Very interesting, because those days, how much of the Quran was revealed anyway.
That's right. That's another point too.
Yeah. And there's a very interesting incident where one day he's sitting with a group of people and explaining Islam to them underneath this tree, the shade of a tree. And a man called Usayd bin Hudayr finds out about this, and he is a member of one of the powerful tribes, Aws and Hazraj, in Medina. And with anger, he grabs his spear, and he comes all the way to the gathering of the Mus'ab. Where Mus'ab was. And he's standing over them with his spear in his hand, waving it. And he begins to shout at Mus'ab. And he says, why are you here? Are you trying to deceive, cloud the minds of our youth? And Mus'ab looked at him. He could see the anger on his face, and he said, "Oh, Usayd, why don't you sit down with us just for a few minutes and listen to what I am saying? If you think what I say is evil, bad, harmful things, you got your spear with you. I do not even have a weapon. You can still kill me.
Wow.
But if you think what I'm saying is good, then you can at least allow us to continue."
What a soft approach.
Yeah,
I mean, how, like, you can see just how he comes and approaches him,
Yes.
and the way he talks back.
Yes.
I mean, in most cases, a lot of people retaliate back, and
Yes,
they'd get into an
yes,
argument,
yes.
and a fight would possibly break out in such situations.
Especially with the culture of the Arabs
That's
of
right.
those days. They wouldn't take something like that.
That's right.
There would be a conflict straight away. But what Mus'ab is doing there, what he learned from the Prophet ﷺ, is sort of showing us methodology. This is what Islam is: kindness, softness, addressing people's
Hearts,
intellectual
minds.
hearts and minds. Yeah.
So it's not a religion being forced upon them.
Mm.
It is being approached to them in a logical way that basically encapsulates their mind, basically, for them to understand.
Definitely. And this is what the Quran suggests anyway. La ikraha fid din. There is no compulsion in religion. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. So upon that soft approach, Usayd bin Hudayr sits next to them, and he begins to listen.
Mm.
And Mus'ab, as Mus'ab explains the Quran to them, you could see the change on Usayd's face. After a while, his heart begins to soften. Like an iceberg, it starts to melt. And suddenly he turns to them and says, "How does one enter this religion?" Very interesting, within a few minutes. And
Because it's the words of God basically
of
being
Allah.
revealed.
Yes.
And back then, poetry was quite common within the Arabs as well,
Yes.
so they could distinguish what is quite influential or word of God
Yes,
in
yes.
comparison to what
Yes,
word
yes.
of human
And
is.
most of them did say, including some very famous poets, that we have never heard of words like this. This is not poetry. This is something different. And later on, Usayd said, how does one enter this religion? Mus'ab explained that he needed to take a full ablution and then recite or declare the kalima shahadat, which he did, and he embraced Islam. And he was a key figure, because he influenced others, key figures in Medina, to embrace Islam as well. And within a very short period of time, only a year, Mus'ab gathered 75 people from Medina and brought them to a region called Aqaba. This was the second Aqaba historically,
Yeah.
where the Prophet came out of Mecca one night. They met on this hill, and all of these people made their pledges to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. They promised that they would protect him if he migrated to Medina. And there were 73 men and 2 women there, as you know. And this was the influence of Mus'ab, such a brilliant young man. And Prophet would sometimes explain about him, and he would point at him and he would say, look at this young man, you know.
I think he was also named the Good.
The Good, the Mus'ab the Good, yes. He would point at him and he would say, look at this young man, you know, he has nothing but a piece of fabric on him, not even a proper shoes. And you might remember that not long ago, he used to walk around in the finest garments, the finest shoes.
I think some of the companions, other companions of the Prophet himself, also started to weep when they saw him come through the doors with only not much.
Yes, seeing
to
him
wear.
in that situation.
Because
in
they
his
remember
clothes.
when he first had come to meet the Prophet.
Yes. But of course, Allah probably loved him the way he was like that.
Yeah.
That was the most important thing. So, continuing with the Mus'ab story, as you know, after the migration, when the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina with Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, his beloved friend and companion, his closest companion, they stayed in that cave, in the cave of Sever for 3 nights, as you know. And there were many incidents that occurred there as well. But just before they left the cave, before they were about to head towards Medina, the Prophet ﷺ looked back upon Mecca, and he said, "Oh my beloved city, Mecca, you know that if they had not forced me out, I would have never abandoned you." That's how much he loved his beloved Mecca. And when he came to Medina, as you know, Quraysh, they had so much anger against the Muslims, and there were, of course, as you know, other political reasons as well, economical reasons as well, and they would not leave them alone, to worship their religions,
Yeah.
to get by their lives, get on with their lives. They gathered an army
To attack the Muslims.
to attack the Muslims in Medina. They just wanted to wipe them from the face of the earth. And they gathered an army of 1,000 men, and they started marching towards Medina.
And that was, I think, where the first verse where it revealed that they were able to protect themselves now.
Yes. And
So that's probably another important,
I think that's an
point as well.
important point there, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally gave Muslims, the permission to protect themselves. Because before that, the permission wasn't there.
That's right, yeah.
They were not even defending themselves. So the 2 armies met at the battlefield of Badr. It's a very famous incident. And there were 1,000 strong men from Quraysh, from Mecca. And the Prophet's army had just over 300 men. And Quraysh was defeated there, although they were so sure that they would win.
Yeah, well,
Easily.
basically the night before they were dancing, drinking
Yes,
alcohol.
yes.
They were quite certain. I mean, you're looking at 3-to-1,
Yes.
the ratio.
3-to-1 ratio. But with the help of Allah, they were defeated. But this made their anger only grow, increase. Only within a year, they prepared another army, an army of 3,000 this time, and they decided to march on Medina again. Upon hearing the news, the Prophet gathered his men together, and they did a consultation, istishara, shura. And in the shura, there was a number of young men, hot-blooded people, although the more elderly, they would go with the decision of the Prophet. Prophet had it in mind that they would stay in the city of Medina and defend the city. But the most of the young men in the committee, they said, "Lord, why don't we go out there and face them on the battlefield?"
I think that was the fact that they were too young to go into the army, the previous battle,
Yes,
fight on
yes,
the battlefield.
yes,
So they wanted to
yes.
experience that
Yes,
battlefield.
yes, yes. But later on, it's very interesting that when the Prophet went to his house and prepared himself, you know, put on his armor and everything, his sword, the young men realized that they were making a mistake. You know, the Prophet's heart was to defend the city. And when he came back, they said, you know, "O noble messenger of Allah, you know, we are sorry for behaving that way. You know, should we stay and defend the city?" And the Prophet said, you know, once a Prophet puts his armor on and his sword on, he does not take it off again.
Yeah.
The decision was made. So they went to the Uhud, where the battle would take place. And during the battle, as you know, at the beginning, that Muslims were defeating them again, very quickly. You know, it didn't take much time, and Quraysh army began to retreat. But there was a very interesting person amongst the Quraysh army then, who would in the future become a Sahabi himself, Khalid bin Walid, the great commander.
That's right. Yeah.
And he saw the situation, and he got his men on horseback, and they went around the mountain and attacked the Muslims from the rear.
Yeah, he found an opportunity and
Yes,
took that opportunity.
yes. And while all of these were occurring, Mus'ab was at the battlefield. You know, there was sort of sandwich in between.
Yeah.
It was a sad incident. And some of the Sahabi took the Prophet and they retreated to Mount Uhud, yeah. But others were left on the battlefield, and Mus'ab was one of them, this young man.
And he was also nominated with carrying the flag as well.
Carrying the banner, yeah, banner of Islam. But as you know, he was martyred there.
Yeah.
And when Mus'ab fell on his back onto the sands of the battlefield, some other Sahabis observed that he was trying to roll over on the ground as he was about to give his last breath. And finally he managed to do so. And then he buried his face into the sand. It's a very interesting
What was
incident.
the reason behind that?
The Sahabi thought, why was he doing that as well? And the noble Prophet, when he came next to Mus'ab's body lying down on the ground, and he said, "Do you know why your friend did that? He did not want to see if something had happened to me, if they harmed me. He thought that he could not answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment if he was held accountable. If Allah said to him, why didn't you protect the Prophet?" He thought, how would I answer that question? So he did not want to see the Prophet being harmed.
Wow. I'd like to thank you for explaining about Mus'ab bin Umayr. Such a fruitful life he had, such a short but very fruitful
Indeed,
life.
indeed. Yeah.
And hopefully on our next session we'll continue maybe with another companion.
Inshallah, inshallah. It'll be
from
good to
another
talk
Sahaba.
about Sahabis and
I think it's a
their
good
lives
idea,
as well.
yes. And I'd like to thank our viewers for listening in today, and hopefully we'll see you next time on Islam Explained.